Hello, today I'm going to show you how to make this lovely crocheted blanket or bed runner and this matching cushion. Okay, so to make the squares I'm using a DMC thread and it's called Special Dentelles, and I'll pop the name of that below. And this is a number 80 and that refers to the thickness of the thread. And I think it goes up to about 100, so the higher the number the finer the thread. So this is a number 80, and this particular range comes in 72 colours, so you've got lots of lovely colours to choose from. And this is just a little chart that I've put together myself, so I printed the actual chart from the internet. So if you search in Google for DMC Special Dentelle colour chart, and then print that off, and then every time I've ordered one of the cottons I've done a few stitches on here, and that's really handy if you want to sort of colour match something in the future, and a lot cheaper too than buying the actual colour charts, which are quite expensive. And the hook size I'm using is a 0.5mm or a number 22. Now this isn't the smallest hook by far, but it's the smallest one that I feel comfortable using. And you don't want to go too small, you've got to be comfortable with the hook you're using, as it will just become a chore and it won't be enjoyable. So choose a hook size that suits you, and you can get them bigger than this as well. I think the next size up, there's a 0.6 and then I think it's 0.75mm. And I wouldn't recommend going any bigger than that for 12th scale, as it will look out of scale. And this hook size, so 0.5 or number 22, produces a square that's just over 20mm square, just over 3/4 of an inch. And I found that each hook size you go up or down increases or reduces the size by 2mm, so 5/64 of an inch. So if you want a smaller square, use the smaller hook, obviously, but like I say, I wouldn't go any bigger than the 0.75, because the square then is sort of over an inch or over 25mm, and that's like in real size that would be a square that was a foot square, so that would look a little bit too big. And then you'll need a nice pair of sharp scissors, and when I'm doing the squares I just snip off the cottontails at the back, but if you're super neat you can leave them a bit longer, and then when you've finished you can stitch those all in at the back so they're completely hidden. But I just sort of snip them off as short as I can and do it that way. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so when I did my first crochet tutorial I actually used the thread and the tiny hook, but it was very difficult getting the camera in focus. So I thought for this one I'll use the 2-ply wool and the larger hook, just because it's a slightly more complicated pattern and I thought it would be easier this way. I hope that's okay with you. So we're going to begin by making the centre of the petal. So take your first colour and make a loop, push your hook through and just tighten that up a bit, not too tight, and so you've got a sort of bit of tail here to hold on to. And then we're going to do a chain of 6. So hook around the back of the wool, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we're going to join that into a ring by putting the hook through the first chain. So you've got 2 loops on your hook, and then around the back of the wool and pull it through both loops, and then just use the tail to tighten up the ring. Okay, and then we're going to do our first chain of 3, so 1, 2, 3, and then around the back of the wool through the ring, so you've got the ring and 2 loops there on your hook, and then pull the wool through the ring. Got 3 loops on your hook, and then you're going to pull the wool through 2 loops and then the remaining 2, and then pull that around on the ring again. And we now want 8 of these spaces now here, which we'll then do our petals into. So back in the chain, and then this time we're just going to do 1 chain, and then we're going to repeat what we just did. So around the back of the wool, through the ring, pull the wool through the ring, 3 loops on the hook, through 2 loops, and through the remaining 2, and then tidy up the ring. So 1 chain, back of the wool, through the ring, pull the wool through the ring, through 2 loops, and through the remaining 2. And we want to keep going until we've got 8 spaces here for our petals. So we've got our 8 sort of strands on there, and then we're just going to do a chain of 1 and then join it into the 3rd chain of that first chain of 3 we did. So just that little loop that's at the top there of your first chain, push the hook through, and then pull the wool through both loops on the hook, and then you can pull the sort of chain out like that to make a loop, snip off the wool, and then just pull that into a knot, pull it quite tightly like that, and then just snip off those ends. And I don't go too short here, I sort of do that at the back, so I leave them a little bit longer than I'll want them eventually. And there's our centre. And I'll just show you that in the 12th scale. This is when your hands feel like they belong to a giant. Now we'll move on to the petals. Okay, we're now going to begin the petals, so join in the petal colour. So put your hook through one of the chain spaces and pull the wool through, and then just tie that into a knot like that, and just tuck the tail around the back there. We're going to start off with a chain of 3, so through the chain space, and then make a chain of 3, and 3. And each petal is made up of 4 crochet stitches, so this makes the first sort of stitch. You'll see what I mean as we go along. So put the hook around the wool twice, so you've got 3 loops there on your hook, and then through the same chain space and pull the wool through. So you've now got 4 loops on your hook, and then you're bringing the wool through the first 2 down to 3 loops on your hook, bring the wool through the next 2, you've now got 2 loops, and then bring the wool through those remaining 2, and that makes the second stitch there, second crochet. So we're going to repeat that, so around the wool twice, through into the chain space, pull the wool through, leaves you with 4 loops on the hook. I'm going to bring the wool through the first 2, through the second 2, and then through those remaining 2. And then we've got 3 of the crochet stitches. And then to make the 4th we do another chain of 3. So 1, 2, 3, and then we join that through the first chain space in our centre. So we just do that again. So we've done our chain of 3, then you're going to push the hook through the chain space, pull the wool through, so you've got 2 loops on your hook, and then pull the wool through those 2. And we'll do that a few more times. So then you want to do a single chain to make a chain space, and then you're going into the next space in your centre. So pull the wool through, and then through the 2 loops. And then we'll do the chain of 3, 1, 2, 3, to make the first stitch of our petal. Pull around the hook twice, into the petal chain space, pull the wool through, so you've got 4 loops on your hook, bring the wool through 2, wool through the next 2, and then the wool through the remaining 2. There's our second crochet stitch. So again, around the hook twice, through the petal chain space, bring the wool through. You've now got 4 loops on your hook, bring the wool through the first 2 loops, through the next 2, through the remaining 2. That's our 3rd crochet stitch, and then we finish off with our chain of 3, 1, 2, 3, fluff on the wool there, I'll leave it, and then we'll back through the chain space in the petal, pull the wool through, so you've got 2 loops on the hook, and then you go through those 2. And there's our second petal. So chain of 1 and into the next space in the petal. And now we're going to repeat those 2 petals in each space until we've got 8 petals. And the final petal. And then to finish off, do your chain of 1, and then we're going to join it in that first chain of the first chain of 3 that we did on that first petal. So it's just in that bottom chain there, push your hook through and then bring the wool through both loops on the hook, like that. There's our 8 petals, and then we're going to do a chain of 4, and then we want to join that in that chain of 1 that we did between each petal. So you're doing a chain of 4 and it's staying at the back, and you're going to go through that chain of 1, pull the wool through, so you've got 2 loops on your hook, and then pull the wool through the 2. So we're making now these sort of loops at the back of each petal where we'll do our leaves, and then we'll join in to do our square. So do another chain of 4, and then bring the hook through the front of the chain space between the next 2 petals. Pull the wool through the chain space, so you've got 2 loops on the hook, and then bring the wool through those 2 loops. Okay, another chain of 4, and the final one, so go through that first chain space, pull the wool through again, so you've got your 2 loops, pull it through the 2 and then extend it, and then you can trim that off. And again, tie that off into a knot. And trim that off. So there's the back of the flower. So we've got one of these loops at the back of each petal. And here is our 12th scale version. Okay, so we're now going to do our leaves, and these are done in exactly the same way as the petals, and we begin by joining the wool in one of these loops that we made at the back. It doesn't matter which one. So pull the wool through and tie that into a knot, and then exactly the same thing as we did for the petals, and we're going to do 3 of these leaves. So begin with your chain of 3, and round the hook twice, exactly as before, and repeat that stitch. And then finish again with the chain of 3, join that through the loop, and same as before, a chain of 1 and then into the next loop along, and do the next leaf. And these leaves are optional. If you want to miss them off, you can just move to the next step, but I think the leaves make it look nice. And you can just do 2 if you wanted to. I'm going to do 3 here. Once you know this pattern, you can adapt it to look exactly how you want it. So if you just wanted to do a couple of leaves like that, you can. Like I say, I'm going to do the 3 into the next loop, pull off a bit more wool. If you enjoy this, do let me know, because I've actually invented quite a few patterns of my own I'd like to share with you. I've never done a large blanket in this pattern. I've done the granny square blankets, but never a flower one. I think that would look really nice actually. Okay, so there's the 3rd leaf, and then we're going to do our chain of 4, and again we're going to make those loops at the back of each leaf. So do your chain of 4 and then turn the work now, because we're working anti-clockwise, and go through that single chain in between the 2 leaves and pull, so through that chain, pull the wool through both loops, and then do another chain of 4 through that single chain space, pull the wool through both loops on your hook, and then one more chain of 4, and then go through just the loop just before the first leaf, like that, and then extend the wool and snip that off. Going to tie that into a knot and trim that off. And there's our leaves, and there's our 12th scale version. Now going to do the first background row. So join in the wool in one of the petal loops rather than the leaf loop, and I find that that just keeps it squarer. So join in one of the loops at the back of the petals rather than at the back of the leaf. Okay, so pull that through, just knot it on. And this is back to the sort of traditional granny square pattern. So we're going to do a chain of 3. So put your hook through the loop, and then a chain of 3, 3, and then go behind the wool, through the loop, and pull the wool through. So you've got 3 loops on your hook, and then you'll go in through 2 loops, and then you'll go through the remaining 2. And then we'll do that again. So hook behind the wool, through the petal loop, bring the wool through. So you've got 3 loops on your hook, pull the wool through 2 loops, and then through the remaining 2. And that gives us the first sort of section. 3 crochet stitches there. And we're now going to make this the corner. So we're going to do a chain of 2, and then we're going to repeat those last 2 stitches. So hook through the petal loop, bring the wool through, pull the 3 loops again, and then bring the wool through 2 loops, and then through the remaining 2. And we do that twice more. we're going to do a chain of 1, and then we're going to go into the next petal loop. Sorry, I'm laughing because there's a squirrel peering through the window at me. So behind the yarn, into the next petal loop, pull the wool through, go through 2 loops, and then through the remaining 2. We're going to do that twice more. Once more. Just gone over the wool on my chair. And then we're going to do a chain of 1, and we're going into the next petal loop, so behind the wool, through the next loop, pull the wool through, and in this one we're going to do another corner section. Behind the wool, through the loop, through 2 and through 2. Repeat that, and then we'll do the chain of 2 to make the corner. And we're going to repeat that 3 more times. So through the petal loop, bring the wool through, through 2 and through 2, twice more. And then our chain of 1, and we're going to go into the next loop. So in each corner we'll do the 2 stitches, and then in between each central one you just do the 1 chain, 2 chains in the corner and 1 chain in between each sort of 3 section. So into the next petal loop, and the final one in there, and then do your chain of 1, and we're going to join that in the 3rd chain we did on that first corner. So push the hook through that corner chain, pull your wool through, extend, and you can snip that off. And if you wanted to do 2 rounds there in that colour, you can, before you go on to the final border. Just make the squares a little bit bigger. For this one I'm just going to do the 1, and here is our 12th scale version. Okay, and then we're back with the main colour for the final round, and I always join on in a corner for no particular reason, I think it's just habit. But we're going to be doing the 2 chain to make the corners, and then on the final round I don't do a chain in between the clusters, and I just find that that keeps it tighter and squarer as well. So join on wherever you like. And begin with the chain of 3. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing again. And then the chain of 2 to make the corner. And then here, instead of doing a chain, just go behind the wool and into your next chain space. And then on this round, of course, there's an extra cluster here along the side. Okay, so once again, join into the third chain of that first chain of 3 that we made. Pull the wool and cast off. And there's the completed square. Trim that off. And there's the completed square in 12th scale. And just by keeping that outer edge tighter, you get more of a square, I find, and it looks a lot neater. Put that to one side, and then I've got another square here that I made earlier, and I just wanted to show you how I join those together. So first of all, have a think about where you want your leaves. So you can keep them all uniform like that, they're all facing the same way. What I tend to do is go round in a clockwise pattern. So that one would go like that, and then down here the leaves would be in that corner, and then down there they'd go up one, so you're sort of turning them. Or you could just alternate it, or however you want to do it. You might just want to do it absolutely randomly, so you'll just pick the square up and stitch it wherever without sort of considering the leaf. That gives a nice effect as well. But these I'll stick with the sort of clockwise pattern. So put them face to face, and if we have a look from this edge, you've got sort of 2 rows of stitches at the edge of your square. So you've got a sort of front row and then a back row. So when you're stitching, always go into the same row. So when they're face to face, go into that front row. And I'll show you what I mean. So pick up the front stitch right in the corner of your square, and the same on your other square. And take your main colour and just pull that through those 2, and again just tie it in a knot. And then go through those same 2 corner stitches again, and then I just begin by doing a chain of 1. So pull your wool through and then do a chain of 1, and then always keeping these lined up so that you've got corner to corner over this other side. Go through the next 2 stitches like that, and then pull the wool through the 2 that you've picked up, and then the 2 loops on the hook, and then through the next 2. So you can sew them together if you prefer, and use a back stitch rather than an over stitch, or you can do it this way, which I actually prefer. checking that you're still sort of lined up. And then when you get to the end, you'll be in those last two corner stitches, right in the corner above the sort of chain of 2 that we did to make the corner join. So same thing again, and then you can cast off in the same way. Pull that nice and tight, and again you can stitch these in, or you can just trim them short once you've completed sewing all the squares together. That just gives you, I find, a nice join. Like that. And then with the smaller blanket, I normally begin by sort of doing a block of 9, so 3 by 3. I've done that twice there, and then I stitch those together, and then I sort of make a little row of the final 3, and then I'll stitch those on. So once you've stitched all of your squares together, I like to then do a final border around the outside, and it just neatens it all up. And to do the final border, it's exactly the same as the final border we did around the square, the individual square. So again, I always begin in a corner, and I do the 2 chain to make the corner, and again I don't do any chains in between, and that way it keeps it nice and tight. So join the cotton into the corner, and begin with your chain of 3. There's the first cluster, and then I'm going to do the 2 chain to make the corner, and then back, twist it round a bit, back into that corner. And then behind the wool and into the next chain, well, not really chain space, but next sort of space on that final border of the square below. And you'll do that in each space. The same in the corner of the square, you'll just treat as another space, and that one as well, until you've gone all the way around. Okay, so when you get to the end there, again go through that 3rd chain in the first chain of 3 that we did when we joined on, and then cast that off. And again, I leave quite a long tail of cotton, tie that into a knot, and then I actually stitch this final thread into the back of the blanket. And this way you don't see that sort of knot on the corner there. So take it into the back of the blanket and just go through a few stitches at the back, pull that through like that and then snip that off. And that just gives a neater finish when you're looking at it from the front. And then, like I said earlier, I go through and just snip off all the threads at the back as short as I can, but be really careful when you're doing it that you don't cut through any of your stitches. Otherwise you can leave these longer as you're doing the squares, and then you can stitch each of them into the back. If you're doing that, kind of do it as you go along, otherwise it's a bit of a chore doing it all at the end. And it is quite time consuming, but you will have a neater back. But if you're quite happy for that to be sort of hidden underneath, then that's fine. Just leave the tails and trim them off at the end. And that looks pretty neat too. So to make the cushion, I've just done another flower square. I've reversed the colours, so I've got the sort of dusky pink here as my petal colour, and I'm using the darker red as the border. And as you can see, I've just done extra rows behind the flower. And then for the back of the cushion, I've just done a granny square. So I'll just show you now how to start that off. And I'll show you again using our big hook. So same thing again, make your loop. And we're going to begin again with a chain of 6. And join those together with the slip stitch. Tighten the ring, and then you'll do a chain of 3. Put the hook behind the wool through the centre of the ring. Pull the wool through the ring, and then through 2 loops and through the remaining 2 loops. Then we're going to do one more of those. So behind the wool, into the ring, pull the wool through, then through 2 loops and through the remaining 2. And that's our first cluster, and then we're going to make a corner. So a chain of 2, and then the same thing again, behind the wool, move that out of the way, into the ring. So chain of 2, behind the wool, into the ring, pull the wool through the ring, pull it through 2 loops and the remaining 2. So we want 4 clusters on here with a chain of 2 between each. And that's 4 clusters of 3. So on your first cluster, the chain of 3 counts as the sort of first crochet stitch. In your second one you'll do 3 of the crochet stitches. So chain of 2 in between, through the ring again. And you can see we're starting to make a square. And I'm sure most of you know this one, just the traditional granny square. Final cluster there, and then in the corner, just to keep it a bit neater, I just do a chain of 1 and then join into the 3rd chain of the first chain of 3 that we did. And then we don't cast off here, you'll do another chain of 3 behind the wool, into that corner, pull the wool through and through 2 loops and through the remaining 2. Same thing again. Then you'll do a chain of 2 to make a corner behind the wool, back into the same corner, and just that same stitch again. And then do a chain of 1 to take you into the next corner. And then again, when I join, I don't do a chain in between. I just find that keeps it neater. And again, we're going into the 3rd chain in the first chain of 3 that we did. And join, and again, no need to cast off, and you would just do your chain of 3. And now we're in a middle section, so we just want to do a cluster of 3 stitches. So that's 2, and 3, and then you would do your chain of 1 and back into your corner, where you'll do 2 clusters of 3 with a chain of 2 in between. And just keep working round until your square's big enough. And on my cushion I did 2 cream rows and 2 dark red rows, and then on my backing square that's 6 rows including that centre. But if you're, depending on how big you want your cushion to be, you might want to do an extra row around the edge. Just keep measuring your granny square until it fits nicely at the back there. And then to stitch the 2 cushion pieces together, we're actually going to have them back to back, and we're going to use the same method as we did to stitch the squares together. So join your wool in a corner, join the 2 corners together, and we want to join 3 sides, so go around 3 sides of the square, and then when you've joined, tuck this tail inside the cushion or between the 2 squares, and begin to join them together. That's actually the tail I was picking up there rather than a stitch. This is why you need such good light, and a magnifier if you need one as well, especially when you're using a darker colour. And I'm using a black cotton. I love doing the sort of traditional granny squares in multicolours with like a black border. They look really lovely, but when I'm bordering in black, I can't do it of an evening. I need the natural daylight, so I can't see what I'm doing. So when you get to your corner, just before you've done that final corner stitch, just do a chain of 1 and then go into the corner, and that will keep the corners square rather than a rounded corner, and then continue along the next edge. Once you've stitched around the 3 edges, you've got like a little bag now, a little pocket. Leave the cotton intact and just take a little bit of wadding. You just need a little bit at a time and sort of pull it apart and poke that inside. Poke it into the corners. Put a little bit more in there. And poke any sort of tails of cotton in as well. And then you can continue stitching along that top edge. Okay, so when you've been all the way around, pull out your cotton and snip it off, leaving quite a long tail. And just tie that into a knot. Pull it nice and tight. And then thread that onto a needle. And push it right through the corner and into the cushion through the wadding and come out on the other side there. Pull it through like that, and then sort of, pulling in the cushion a bit, you can then snip that off. And then when you've straightened out your cushion, you've got a hidden join. So move your wadding about in there to make it nice and square. And there's the completed cushion. A little thread poking out there, I'll just get rid of that. Straighten out your flower petals. And there is the completed throw. That's ready now to go on the bed. So this one is made up of 21 squares, 7 rows of 3, but you could easily get another row in there if you wanted to, or you might want to do a sort of full blanket, and then you could move up your undersheet, however you want to do it. Do have a look at the granny square tutorial as well, because you might just want to do a granny square throw on here. That one was for a double bed, but obviously you could just make fewer squares or make the squares with fewer rounds. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this project, and I do hope you'll give it a go. If you're new to crochet, it is sort of tricky to get started, but once you know some of the basic sort of stitches, you'll pick it up really quickly. I find it easier than knitting myself. You also might like to have a look at my books. I've got 3 books available now, and they're all available to purchase from Amazon, and I'll pop a link below. And for now, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.